This is Tina Katola and Sarah Kotz here at Third Stage Astrology. And what we are going to be discussing today is the 3 stages of the sun in Virgo. Now, what Third Stage Astrology is about the concept that I've discovered or recovered. Lots of, both of those things are kind of true, that we stay the same sign for a long series of lifetimes, and we go through 3 stages of development with each sign, and each stage lasts for 3 or 4 lifetimes. And each stage is a completely different personality type. That's why in my book I use the images of the caterpillar, the cocoon, and the butterfly to indicate the kind of change and transformation and how these stages are all connected to each other, but they're also all tremendously different from one another. And to really understand where you're going and where you've come from, it's super helpful to understand these stages. So what happens with Virgos is that a lot of souls that are coming into the earth plane that are kind of new here, come in through the sign of Virgo. Some of them might be older souls, but they're not really from here. And they do spend time in a very purified, very balanced, positive place or state of consciousness before becoming human. They are aware that this human world, this physical earth world that we experience right now, needs a lot of help. It's kind of in a mess. It's really out of balance. And the place that they come from has a tremendous wholeness and purity. So they're coming in to share that wholeness, share that purity, heal the world, heal the earth. And the concept of healing can take many, many forms. So when Virgo perfects themselves, it can be political transformation. It can be lots of different ways that we utilize or interpret the concept of to heal. So it doesn't mean you have to be a physical healer. It doesn't mean you have to be an emotional healer. You can create wholeness in some facet of existence. And in order to get to the point where you can do that, the first thing you have to do is you have to be able to learn how to adapt to a very primitive, challenging, difficult world that we live in, and to find a way to discover and utilize your talents in this earth world. So first stage Virgos spend 3 or 4 lifetimes being born into very protected environments. So because they're so pure and so sensitive in a certain way, it's not really very good for them to just sort of hit the ground running and deal with the craziness of this world. They need to be protected for a little while they get used to learning the ropes of the world. So first stage Virgos come into a pretty protected environment. It's often, very common to be in wealthy environments or to be placed into situations where you have a lot of resources at your disposal and a lot of people who look after you and protect you. Not all first stage Virgos are actually born into wealth and prominence, but a lot of them get lifted into it at a very early age. And some are born there, that's the whole world. They've never known any difference. And they have souls that they are born to or that they are destined to encounter during their lifetime who know their natural abilities, who unconsciously know what they're here to do, what they're here to learn. And so they're given a tremendous easy opportunities to make it big in some way, to really develop those talents, develop those skills, and really kind of shine. But they're doing it kind of with sort of like with training wheels on. They aren't really hitting the biggest challenges in life quite yet. Mm-hmm. And this is this is very important. It's very important for them to develop, express, have a real sense of what their natural talents and skills are, to get that protection while they become adjusted to elements of earth life. Some Virgos, as they get to the end of first stage, can have some tyrannical people around them. Some Virgos have a tyrannical father. That's not an uncommon thing as a person gets towards the end of first stage. It's not the case for everybody, but it can have an impact. The other thing that happens is eventually they start to feel like they're missing out on something because they're living in a really beautiful environment, but they also are aware that it's sheltered. And they know there's other things going on in the world. So they start to feel a little frustrated, a little restless, like they want more of the world. They're not ready to go out yet. They don't want to sacrifice this wonderful cocoon that they're in yet. And at the same time, the more primitive nature of certain humans, of certain people, becomes very jealous of them because they've been given all kinds of tremendous opportunities and things have come so easily to them. There's a real resentment that builds up amongst younger souls and the souls that are still very sort of animalistic and competitive. And the other thing is that souls that are more animalistic have animal instincts. And one thing about animals is that they sense the difference in other animals. So I've mentioned before about, a cat I used to have who was genetically very different from the other cats I had. And all the other cats, whenever they got a chance, they beat her up because she was different. She looked different. She smelled different. There's this tendency to be hostile to outsiders that the animal instinct has. And because Virgos they have a quality of something different about them. They're doing this incredible thing and they're well loved, they're really successful, but they seem a little alien on a certain level. And the more instinctive, jealous, negative types feel their difference, and they say to themselves, well, why should that weird, strange alien have all the breaks and I'm not getting all the breaks? So the unfortunate thing about having Sun in Virgo is that people who have Sun in Virgo, and this can be overcome, but people who have Sun in Virgo can make enemies without trying, because these more primitive natured souls decide all on their own. They don't like you. And in first stage, they're on the other side of the wall. There's a walled garden that a first stage Virgo is protected by. So those others on the other side of the wall, they just kind of prowl around and grumble. But when it's time to leave the first stage of Virgo after 3 or 4 lifetimes of being in this really protected environment, and really expressing all your talents and skills, those more primitive creatures that happen to have human bodies are waiting. And when it's no longer of value to the soul to be in such a protected environment, this protection ends, and it tends to end pretty suddenly. So for some people, they've been in a protected environment, but the society that they're in breaks down suddenly. Other people, a series of events just happens so that the people who were their friends and their allies desert them. Their parents may have been very, very supportive when they were younger. Their parents pass away. They have slowly more and more resentful people around them, and they get attacked. They lose all their support. They lose this safe position, and it's extremely traumatic because you've lived in the lap of luxury and you're still a pretty innocent soul, and all of that just gets ripped away. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a reason why that happens, and it is because Virgo's purpose is to be the healer. And when we have a spiritual purpose, there are things we have to learn. So our environment sets us up to learn these things. And there are things that we need to know how to do. So Virgo needs to know how to heal, and therefore they need to have something to experiment on in order to learn the healing techniques. But because we're dealing with the soul or the higher self that doesn't want to cause harm to anyone outside of themselves, they're going to have a guinea pig. And the only guinea pig they could possibly have, given those parameters, is themselves. So they basically become their own guinea pig. They get traumatized by this massive loss of everything and everyone who cared about them, and loss of all their prestige, loss of support. So now they suddenly are out in these cold, hard streets. And people change stages with just about every sign, can change stages at any age, at any time in their life, because when it's time for the soul to move on, the soul moves on. So this could happen at an early time in a person's life. This could happen later on in the life. Sometimes people don't survive very long after the end of first stage Virgo. Now, we don't have to go down into second stage. We don't have to have this be this horrible tragedy that has no positive reason for a very long time. Because at the end of first stage of any sign, there is a doorway that opens up that I call the crossroads, where the soul has an opportunity to make the step towards third stage. So for each sign, third stage is when we're really expressing the full purpose of the sign. And second stage is where we are reacting to a trauma. Everybody has a trauma at the end of first stage. And throughout second stage, we're reacting to the trauma. We're dealing with all the permutations of that trauma, that question, that painful process, and it deepens us. So it's not a mistake to go through second stage. But if someone's watching this and it looks to them like they've had a first stage Virgo lifetime, and now everything is falling apart and coming unglued in a horribly exponential way, you do not have to go into second stage. The world does not need to come to an end, although the old world needed to come to an end. You can now create a new way for yourself that will be constructive and will be positive. But it's important to realize the path of least resistance is going to be to take you down in a second stage. So for Virgos being so traumatized by everybody attacking you, by losing all your support, it's the most automatic reaction in the face of extreme trauma is to shut down, just to block away, and it's an almost a knee-jerk reaction, block off some of your feelings, block off your sensitivities, wall yourself up. And in doing so, it's going to just cause you to gravitate straight down into second stage. So the key to go towards the third stage and actualize that natural capacity as a healer, which is your true soul destiny, is to go really deeply inside yourself. Instead of shutting yourself away from yourself, where all your emotional pain is, you go deeper into yourself, even deeper than your emotional self, to reach the spiritual self, to reach an inner voice, an inner being that can guide you and support you. Because first stage Virgos are used to always having people who help them, people who support them. That's a necessary experience during first stage. Once we're at the end of first stage, we don't need that experience anymore. So at that point, we need to either go down towards second stage or go into the self and listen to that inner guidance, which is our spiritual being. Really, God is within. God or divine consciousness is at the core of all of us. It's all around us. It is all that is. But our personalities, our emotional selves, our bodies are not automatically geared to understand that principle. So if you're seeing this, it's an opportunity to go in and listen within and be cared for and protected and guided by that inner being that will tell you intuitively whatever needs to happen next. The inner voice doesn't give you a long plan of all the different steps that are going to be necessary. It's just going to tell you what you need to know right now, what the next step is, but it will guide you step by step into your own wholeness, into your own integrity, and into your own sovereignty as a true independent individual who is still capable of being open to positive experiences. So you're going to walk through the storm, listening to that inner voice, and that will take you to the third stage. Now, most people in most signs do not do that first third stage transition. Most people at the crossroads go down into second stage. And so what happens when a person goes into second stage Virgo is that because they've been so traumatized, they're now shutting down pieces of themselves, and they begin to be focused on surviving. Because before they had their survival looked after for them, and now they're on their own. They have to learn how to be strong, how to survive on their own. And some Virgos right away just make that their absolute mission. I'm going to put my armor on. I'm going to learn how to have control. And so coffee table astrology books, as I call them, they have a kind of stereotypical image of Virgo as being picky and critical and kind of controlling. And some second stage Virgos do express a lot of those traits, but the reason that they do it is because they've been really pretty traumatized and brutalized, whether they realize it now, because we spend several lifetimes in each stage. So a person can be in the second stage of Virgo and they don't consciously remember when all hell broke loose and everyone attacked them and they had no one to look after them but themselves, but subconsciously they do. And so they're always, some people, the image of Virgo often goes along with the image of the germaphobe and everything has to stay clean. And that's some second stage Virgos, but it's that fear of being invaded again, of something really bad happening. Something bad happened before and I didn't see it coming, so I have to make sure everything's okay. So that's the sort of quote unquote control freak Virgo, and it comes from, I've got to be strong, I've got to be on my own, I've got to make sure I'm safe. And as that develops, if it develops in a positive way, it's going to give you a real strong, independent capacity to really make it in the world. And so that's positive. But when it's defensive, there are those other side effects that come. And one of those side effects is not easily letting people get close to you. And when a person is very traumatized and they've shut down parts of themselves, getting emotionally close or even physically close to other people opens up your emotional nature again. And then you start feeling those buried traumas and it feels really unpleasant. So then you have to pull away from that, the source of that heat, the metaphoric heat of love, the metaphoric heat of emotional intimacy is what melts the frozen traumas so that you're feeling them again. It's like, okay, I can't deal with this, to pull away from people. So there's a fear of intimacy, whether it's a conscious fear or a subconscious fear, that is a feature of all second stage Virgos to a degree. And it really comes from a fear of intimacy with oneself. Because when you become fully intimate with yourself, and all the buried traumas from this lifetime, and particularly from the other lifetime, if you didn't pass through first, second stage in this lifetime, you got a great big trauma in your past. You don't want to feel it again because you don't know what to do with it when you're in second stage. Other second stage Virgos, and people can do all these different possible responses at different times in a lifetime. Others, they don't want to be alone. They want to be protected again. So they're looking for someone to support them again. But in second stage Virgo, it's not beneficial to you anymore because you have to learn your independence. And yet, because you feel so wounded and you feel so frightened and you feel so lonely, you want that partnership, you want that support. But your second stage Virgos will continually be attracted to people who will take advantage of them, or people who will want a codependent kind of relationship where we're going to feel safe together because we give up parts of ourselves in order to maintain this relationship. There's no real true intimacy. There's just a constant compromising that is damaging to both parties, but is not being looked at. Denial is the principle, the kind of divine ideal of second stage people. And because Virgo is the healer, they in a sense are living out a very extreme archetype of what second stage is for everybody, because they're going to learn how to help other people achieve their wholeness. So they need to know what denial is all about, so they can live in an extreme state of denial in second stage and find somebody who seems like a protective partner, who is either involved in a very codependent exchange that is robbing both people. Neither one is happy, but they feel safe, or they think they're safe, and or they will find somebody who will really take advantage of them and be very controlling, and then they have to pull away from that relationship and go back to trying to figure out how to survive all on their own. So it's not fun. Second stage in any sign really is not fun.
What do you, when you say healing, like you're using it in a broader sense, like what type of healer, like I guess that could be really a broad range. It could be really
a broad range, yeah. In terms of to make whole, to bring wholeness,
okay,
to bring things back to balance and to its natural state of real love, real trust, being in its true state of whole being. That is the ultimate outcome of any form of healing. And that's why at the beginning I was talking about how a third stage Virgo could be a political healer.
Okay,
like
that makes sense.
It's just returning things to the natural state of wholeness that it's meant to be living in, whatever it might be. So
yeah, okay, that's great.
yeah, they could be a corporate consultant who returns the corporation to a state of wholeness and a high functioning and constructive functioning. That's one thing that a third stage Virgo can do. I have a friend who's a third stage Virgo who is doing that kind of work.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Yeah, so by the time we get to the end of second stage in any sign, we're really worn out, we're really tired of all of these things. Another thing that people in second stage experience is a tremendous fear of abandonment, which is totally understandable, because the very worst thing that happened to them at the end of first stage was they were abandoned. So poor Virgos can get involved in relationships where the person is continually abandoning them. And oftentimes they're getting abandoned by that person because they don't relate. Second stage Virgo is not relating in a full, healthy way because parts of themselves are shut down. They're not consciously aware of it, because if you were born with parts of yourself in a state of numbness, if you've got Novocaine in parts of your body, that feels normal to you. You're not going to feel certain things. If your arm is numb and something pokes you, you're not going to feel that. Yeah. But you don't know you're not feeling certain things. You don't know you're not responding in a completely normal way. And
Yeah.
so, but then they certainly experience that fear of intimacy. As much as they want someone there and they want to be in a relationship with someone, they won't let that person get completely close to them. They can have sexual issues because a lot of times at the end of first, second stage Virgo, they've had sexual traumas. So they've got these pieces shut off. And so a person can get involved in a relationship with them and then they're not letting them close. So the person goes away and the Virgo feels horribly abandoned. And it's an awful thing for Virgo people because they don't know really what's going on.
Yeah.
So you enter second, third stage. In any sign, we all enter second, third stage when we've had enough. We don't want any more pain. We don't want to keep making enemies because we didn't do anything. You know, Virgo throughout second stage is still having people decide they hate them for no reason because they still have that weird karmic connection to these primitive souls who resented them in first stage. So you're tired of all this crap. It's too many things, and you want things to be different. You want things to change. You're willing to do anything. You're going to dig anywhere, dig inside yourself, try to find answers wherever you go. That is the beginning of second, third stage. And when you begin to get answers, almost everybody has a wow when they first enter second, third stage. They suddenly understand a whole other spiritual dimension, a whole other aspect of the emotional reality of their lives, of the causes of things that are going on. A lot of people have a wow and then they scurry back into second stage for a while. That's very normal. You go back and, you know, if I have a client who's just entering second, third stage, I tell them, you know, if this freaks you out, just go watch a lot of television, eat some junk food,
Yeah.
shut yourself down for a little while until you adjust to this
Yeah.
new experience of being in second, third stage. What second time person goes into second, third stage, they just keep going forward. So throughout second, third stage, and it generally takes between 1 and 4 decades to make it through second, third stage. Seems like forever because for the personality, that's a long time. For the soul, that's a very rapid transformation. And all signs are transmuting several lifetimes worth of crap that they're not consciously aware of during that time period. In all signs, in first stage, our conscious mind is the dominant part of our psyche. In second stage, the subconscious mind is the dominant part of our psyche. So in second stage, our reactions are sourced from the subconscious level on the basis of all these past traumas we don't fully remember. In third stage, the higher self or the spiritual consciousness of the individual is the dominant part of the psyche. So when we're in second, third stage, our little conscious mind is sitting there trying to dovetail between these subconscious patterns that are like these big rolling waves you don't understand, and the spiritual consciousness that is starting to come in and learning how to integrate this spiritual understanding into transforming their subconscious patterns. And that's why it feels impossible. That's why it feels like it takes forever, but that's also why it always succeeds. So if things feel like it's really, really tough right now and you're looking for answers, then you are in second, third stage and you will get those answers. You're going to make it through. So for each sign, there are riddles that need to be unresolved or answers that need to be uncovered. There are keys to mastering second, third stage, and they're different for each sign. For Virgo, there's a couple of really important keys. One is to be unconditionally self-supportive. Virgos learn eventually, or maybe pretty quickly, that judgment freezes growth and love accelerates growth. So when Virgos go through the fear of intimacy, it's an ugly, awful feeling because, of course, you want intimacy, but you get close and all this junk starts coming up and all these ugly feelings are like a brown goo on a psychic level is surrounding you. It feels so ugly and awful. You run away from that intimacy and you feel ugly. You feel bad about yourself. And this is where the Virgo gets the concept of being critical. And they'll be critical of themselves. And the moment you're critical of yourself, everything jams up. Because criticism is a form of attack. Like you got attacked at the end of first stage. To accept yourself and be loving and caring and nurturing towards yourself in the midst of all this surfacing. So Virgos will have a lot of different traumas surfacing at different times. Because what's happening is the only way to get those frozen parts of yourself back is to feel the feelings that are buried in the trauma. One interesting thing about trauma is we will not be traumatized if whatever we experience is something we allow ourselves to completely feel at the time. If we let all the feelings that are occurring in that moment of trauma express through us so that we feel them and experience them, we will move through that situation without trauma. Trauma occurs when we have an emotional overload from what's going on, which is totally understandable because sometimes it just is too much. And so it stays frozen. We're frozen in that pain, whether it happened 3 or 4 lifetimes ago or whether it happened last week. If there's trauma, it's frozen pain. So the frozen pain melts during second, third stage, and Virgos learn how to be unconditionally self-supportive and caring, how to have unconditional love for themselves as they go through this. And they learn slowly how to share that, sometimes with other people. It's a significant breakthrough when a second, third stage Virgo can share with a significant other this process they're going through as they're going through this, the healing the pain. I'm trying to think of what other pieces there are. Second, third stage Virgo does get these different pieces themselves back. They're a real emotional nature, they're a real sexual nature. The other thing that's really important is to listen to the inner voice. Now, Virgos are used to, there's still a part of them that wants someone else's help, wants an outside source of knowledge that's going to give them the answer or that's going to fix a problem. And sometimes these things, sometimes outside sources of information help, but when it comes to this transformation, it's got to be internal. It's got to be from within. So like what I talked about first, third stage transition, the person has to go in and listen to that inner guidance, that quiet inner voice that knows the truth of the situation, knows the wholeness of the situation. And there's a tremendous resistance to doing that because the inner voice is at the very core of our being. All the buried pain and trauma is kind of sitting between the conscious self and the core. You've got to pass through or step around all that old pain and suffering in order to listen to that inner voice. That inner voice will guide the person. And second, third stage Virgos overcome codependent relationships. They can't try to lean on someone else, but they do need to let people in. So there's this fine line of learning what true sharing is that is not dependent in any way. And that's not going to be an invasion like all the second stage traumas. So over time, Virgo learns how to heal themselves by being there for themselves and letting the pain come up and be released. And then third stage Virgo is a tremendously whole being. They have more of a wholeness and a oneness within all the facets of their being than anybody else does. And they can transmit that sense of wholeness to other people. And they are healers, whether they do it in a very specific sense of being, helping people spiritually or being physical healers or emotional healers, or in a more broad sense. But in the presence of a third stage Virgo, if you're suffering and you're struggling with some kind of pain you need to get through, they have the ability, just by looking in their eyes, to show you that I've been through everything you've been through. I got through it. I unconditionally accept you just the way that you are. They've learned how to do that with themselves so they can transmit that to someone else very easily. You can do it. You can make it. That they're just very unconditionally accepting and unconditionally supportive, and they just let people be where they are. That is actually a keynote of a third stage person of any sign, is they let people be where they are. Because when we're in second, third stage, we often want people to come out of their suffering and they're struggling now. Second, third stage people often try to pull second stage people out of that muck they're swimming around in. But third stage people go, no, you're fine the way you are. If you need to stay there, that's okay. I accept you just the way you are. So third stage Virgo lives that, really in spades in a really big way.
Yeah. Well, that's great.
Yeah, and they have really positive, intimate relationships. They can't have a partnership with any sense of dependency or neediness. They need true intimacy that is very uncontrolling from a partner, because that's the kind of partner they become.
No, it's, I know a few Virgos, so this sounds very similar, especially the organizing and the cleaning. It's interesting.
Yeah.
A little bit more of a trademark, I feel, for the people that I've met. So it's, it really sheds some light on what that sign is kind of through. So that's really helpful.
Yeah. Well, Virgos and Sagittarians seem to have a connection. They travel together a lot through a lot of lifetimes.
Yeah. Cool. That's really cool.